Hi, happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to Marry Me Mondays. I really enjoy the topic that we're going to focus on today, which is family dynamics and holiday sharing, especially coming off of Mother's Day yesterday. It really got me thinking to my experience of sharing holidays and how to make sure both parties' families feel prioritized, as well as making sure you're prioritizing your own needs in your relationship when it comes to holidays. But when you're combining two families that have their own traditions, their own, things that they find important for their family, right? Because everyone's family is different, whether that's religion, whether that's just, you know, how you spend time together as a family, because I know that looks different for everybody. Some families don't spend a lot of time just getting together for random events. Some people do regular Sunday dinners. Whatever it is, when you're combining two families, you have to find a way to make sure that both partners feel prioritized, right? Not only themselves, but their families, right? It's important for you and your partner to discuss how you're going to integrate both families into your new life. Now, if you've been dating for a while, you've probably done this a little bit, but there is something really different about that next layer of saying, okay, we're now married and we're building this life together, and whatever our life is going to look like, especially if you're going to have children, right? You're going to create your own traditions, your own way of navigating your family dynamics. And it's not easy for some. And while some people have great relationships with their in-laws, there can be difficulties in those family dynamics that are hard to navigate. That so not only are you dealing with how to spend time together as a family, holidays, but also you're dealing with personality, maybe even conflict, right? So these are the three things that I highlight as kind of the important things to discuss with your partner before you get married, so you can come up with your own way of navigating and finding balance for your family. So there now, again, there's so many factors that can impact these conversations, but these are the three that I find to open up the most dialogue when it comes to these topics. So the first thing when it comes to family dynamics and holidays that I stress with my clients to talk about before you say I do is the general topic of spending time with family, right? Making sure you both understand how often each of you likes to see and spend time with your family. Is that, is one person going over there after work nightly, weekly, on a particular day, right? Do you watch football games with your family every Sunday? You like to have dinner on Fridays? What does an average week look like? What does that look like for you? And make sure that you're clear about how you prioritize your marriage on a day-to-day basis, so that it doesn't interfere with that as well. Because some people do have certain days of the week that they prioritize extended family, but you have to remember you're now coming in with a partner who wants to feel like they're important. And so what you might have done before might need to be tweaked. It might not. Your partner may say, okay, like we go to your parents' house every Sunday, we go to your sister's house one Friday a month for this or this, whatever it is. If that works for you guys, great. But you also have to understand that there's conflict with the other side. What are their traditions? Do those overlap, or are you going to have to alternate where you spend time? Additionally, how often are you going to be expected to host your partner's family in your own home? Because that can be exhausting. It can be a heavy burden. Burden might be not necessarily the best choice for every family, but sometimes it can feel that way. You can feel like that heavy obligation to have to host and entertain your partner's family. So just talking about what is everybody's expectation for how you're going to share time and how you're going to make sure that both families feel included and important and prioritized, but also your marriage is not being interfered with when it comes to how you two live your lives on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So, the second topic that I think is very important is helping or caring for family. Now, this can come into play in a couple different ways because you don't know what the future looks like. But if a family member needs help, you really need to make sure that both of you are on the same page for how to support your family, right? And I start with, are the both of you comfortable with loaning money? Loaning money within family is super controversial topic. How people loan money, if they loan money. You want to make sure that everybody understands that if you agree that it's acceptable or appropriate to loan money out from time to time, what are your rules for doing that? Does it have to be agreed upon by both parties before it happens? Is there a certain dollar amount that you two agree is kind of your max? Or even is there a dollar amount that you would just rather consider a gift and not have the stress about a loan? But if somebody needs help and you have the financial means to help them, what are the rules that you two want to live by so that no one feels either not even taken advantage of it, no one feels like their voice isn't being heard in that situation, just to make family dynamics more comfortable, right? For example, you can say, anything under $500 or something is a gift. And so if somebody needs some money and it's under $500, let's just gift it to them and not deal with it. And if we can do that, we will do that. And anything smaller than, $250, you don't even need to ask, just gift it. And then anything above $500 has to be agreed upon, and you two absolutely agree that no more than $5,000 can be loaned at any time. And if there's a loan, we need to have a very strict payback schedule, and we should write it down and have everyone sign it, right? And enforce it. Now, that doesn't have to look exactly like that. I'm just giving you some examples of ways in which you can define rules. And, some people say, rules make it sound like you're in a business relationship and you don't trust each other. But what we're talking about here is having expectations set and making sure everyone's on the same page. So when I say rules, you two are making them. You are the only ones enforcing them. But if you don't have them and somebody does something that the other person's not comfortable with, well, now the marriage is in conflict over family and loaning money, and that is one of the messiest things that I think can happen in a marriage when it comes to your extended family and money. It's dicey. I always say, if you're going to loan money, define what that looks like, make sure you're on the same page, get it signed and put it aside. If you choose not to enforce a repayment schedule and you two end up just waving it down the line, that's your choice. But staying consistent so that no person in the marriage feels as though family is being prioritized over the needs of the marriage. So that's what I like to see. I like to see rules. We definitely, in my own marriage, we talk about those types of things and say, how are we going to agree to this? We definitely don't do it without talking to each other. And we have certain rules that we follow. We don't necessarily do things in writing like I recommend at times, but we both know exactly what our expectations are and we communicate them. So money and helping family is kind of like the first prong of this that I think is really helpful. So just small short list of rules that you two want to, follow. And then, are you two prepared to care for a sick parent or a sick sibling or another sick family member? And this could also come in a couple different forms. Are we talking about just financial support? Do they need financial support where they're living? Are you drawing money in a certain way to pay for assisted living or something like that? Will a parent or a sibling or family member live in your home and then you provide care that way? Or are you setting them up in some other way? Do they need, medical care, nursing care? Can you afford to do that? And if you can, how are you planning for that? Sometimes, right, it starts with a conversation within your marriage, but a situation like this might have to expand to siblings as well. Because if you are one of several siblings, you each might be in a different place to provide care for either a sick parent, or each other in one way. And somebody might be in a better position than the other, right? Say one family has just a much bigger home, has an in-law unit kind of already built, not necessarily using it, but has the setup to make that process easier than maybe somebody who lives in the city in a high rise or something like that, and it's just not conducive to their lifestyle. But maybe they can provide some additional support or help in other ways. So I always say this starts with a conversation within your marriage and what you two each agree you're willing to do or able to do for a sick parent. And then once you know how you feel about it, you can bring in other siblings into that conversation and make sure there's a plan, because that will also help alleviate stress on your marriage. Because in a marriage, you have two sets of parents often. And what happens if you each have a parent that needs help at the same time and you can't do both and you have to make a choice, right? And that's why having the conversation within your marriage and then extending that to siblings is a really great way to make sure that all the family dynamics of that conversation are covered. Because that way, when something happens, you're not necessarily kind of scrambling to put a situation together that's going to serve everybody as best as possible. Obviously, caring for a sick parent can be financially, emotionally, physically straining. And so having some things thought out in advance can be really helpful in those moments. So the next topic is holidays. And, in my premarital planning course, Marry Me Smart, I have like a whole section about holidays and even writing holidays down and how you're going to spend them, kind of assigning them to each person's family. And that doesn't have to be strictly followed, and you might already kind of have an idea. But when it's not a simple process, and I'll give you a simple process, is like when I started dating my husband and then ultimately when we got married, his family always celebrated Christmas on Christmas Eve. My family always celebrated on Christmas. Our parents lived in the same city. They lived a mile apart. It was never a problem. So once we knew that, we didn't really have to argue or talk about it. It was pretty straightforward and simple. And so we didn't really have a lot of conflict in that regard. And their other holidays just weren't really much of a conversation, but we did at least kind of sort it out. Thanksgiving was one we kind of talked about, and his family sometimes went down to Southern California, and we weren't really wanting to do that during the holidays. And so for a long time, we always spent Thanksgiving with my family. My husband was fine with that. So we had kind of a brief conversation. Otherwise, neither of our families really prioritized other holidays that much. But Mother's Day was one of those where we would spend time at both parents, and it was easy again because they lived a mile away. But what if that's not the case, right? And what if your family, you're spread out, live in different states or different cities, and you have to drive to them? And so having a plan about how you're going to kind of split up the holidays, but also prioritize the ones that are most important to each of your families is, again, helpful to not only alleviate stress in your marriage, but also provide your family some predictability. And they can kind of feel that you're, making an effort to ensure that both families feel like, they're included in the life that you're building together. So I always say, talk about the holidays that are most important to you first, because that's going to make your list easy. What are the holidays that both families find important? And are there any that one family finds important or the other? Those ones you can kind of put to the side and say, okay, no problem. Like, your family cares about Easter, mine doesn't. So we'll always do Easter with your family. Those might be some easy ways to approach those. But maybe something like Christmas or another religious holiday that both of you, both families, prioritize or have their own traditions. That one might have to either be, alternated on a yearly basis, or you split time within the day if you don't travel. But starting with which ones are most important is the first step, again, because you're going to have a list of the ones that need to be, dealt with, and the ones that don't, because those ones aren't as important. And so when there's overlap, you're going to talk about coordinating with both families. Again, logistics. Where do they live? Are there holidays where we're going to have to fly or travel? And if that's the case, then maybe alternating each year might make more sense. Or Is there a way you can split for, I'll use Christmas as an example, where you can go like the 22nd through Christmas morning, and then you can fly Christmas morning and spend Christmas morning with the other family? Sometimes that can work. I know flying on the holidays, especially if you have kids, is not necessarily that easy. And so trying to figure out how you want to divide that up and knowing what your plan is in advance helps everybody plan, because obviously you're not the only ones it impacts. You might have siblings and they have their own families and how they're spreading time. And so this is again one of those examples where once you narrow down what's important to each partner's family and have, okay, this is the list and how we're going to do them, then you can bring the conversation in with your siblings. I do this every year because I have a brother and my sister-in-law, and my sister-in-law's family is in Washington. And so we're always kind of checking like, hey, are you guys going up there or down here? And usually it's alternating years. And so we make sure when we're all going to be together for my family's Christmas that we are kind of on their schedule because we're a little bit more flexible. And sometimes we have to miss Christmas and we do it like on the 28th, and to be honest, that's fine. I mean, we're spending time together. It's not a big deal for us, but for some families, that's not fine. And so there's no right or wrong, right? It's what works for your family. And on this same topic, what traditions are most important when it comes to holidays? Because sometimes those traditions and making those happen are more important than how you actually spend the day, right? Like some people say like, oh, it's really important for us to chop our Christmas tree down. And so you can spend Thanksgiving with one family, but you return and you chop the Christmas tree down the day after Thanksgiving together as a family with the other family. Or it's really important that everyone comes over 2 weeks before Christmas to decorate the tree together and we do this whole thing. Okay, well, maybe you can prioritize that versus being, on Christmas Day at a certain time. It's about finding balance. But you also are going to realize that life is going to change. Not every year is going to look the same. I know that before my husband and I had children, we were the flexible ones. We would go anywhere. Like, okay, when do you guys want to celebrate Christmas? We'll go here. Like we'll drive up. We'll go here. It doesn't matter because we didn't have a child, and our traditions, yes, were important to us and we had our own, but we were a little bit more flexible with them. Now having a child, my daughter is just turned 2. I'm a little bit protective of our own family traditions. And so when I used to make a sacrifice, when I used to, not exactly that dramatic, but when I used to go like, oh, okay, we can come up there, Christmas Eve and stay, wake up Christmas morning. I don't want to give that up just yet. My daughter's young and I want to wake up in my home and do our Christmas traditions in our home. And then, we'll drive on Christmas Day or fly on Christmas Day to wherever we need to go. That's the phase of life that we're in right now. So I communicated that to my parents and my families that, hey, this is important to me right now. And they all understand, and we're going to coordinate around it and make it all work. That might change for me. And in your relationship, it could change from year to year. You could start, maybe one year you randomly go on a trip and now you're committed to going on a trip as a couple or a family every year for Christmas and spending it with just you. And that's your new tradition. Family's going to have to accept that in some way. And as long as the two of you are on the same page about what you want that to look like and the traditions you're building, then, your family is either going to accept it or they're not, but your marriage is the one that's got to be prioritized first. And so that's kind of the progression of the conversation, right? Is it starts with how are we spending time with family and how are we supporting family in times of need? And then how are we going to share ourselves and our marriage with our extended families for holidays? And the biggest thing that I can see being a difficulty for a lot of couples, especially through many of the commentary from clients, is feeling like one person's family is not as important as the other because maybe they have more dramatic traditions, like, something you can actually define as a tradition, whereas one family maybe just likes to get together and hang out as a family, but it's not necessarily particularly defined or special or something in that regard. But it can feel like one family is more important. And that is really where a lot of people can build resentment, they can build anger, the family's relationships can start to experience some distance. But if the two of you are on the same page and you're communicating with your families that this is what you both decided, because the last thing you need is one of you blaming the other person that, oh, we can't spend Christmas with you, or can't do this because we have to spend it with the other family. Well, that's not accurate, right? You're making the choice. And the more united the two of you can be on these things, the easier sometimes it is for families to accept. Now, this does not account for very difficult in-laws and extended families who feel entitled to your time as a couple. And I'll tell you right now that that's not what families should be doing. That's my own opinion. I've never been made to feel any way from my family or my husband's family that I needed to spend time with them versus my family or vice versa. We've also made an effort to, spend time with both, but family shouldn't do that, right? You're going to have to split your time. That's the reality of building a life with somebody else who has their own relationship. And so you have to be prepared to navigate what could be a difficult conversation at times with your in-laws. But if you do it as a united couple, it gets easier. You two have agreed to the plan. You can communicate it as a plan. And again, this isn't some strict, you don't have to write it down. I have a workbook where you write it down. That's simply so you guys kind of have an idea. You two can just operate on it and communicate. But the more predictability you have in your lives around a lot of these things, the more expectations that can be managed from the outset, then the less stress you can have on what is in usual situations already stressful, right? If a parent gets sick, holidays are stressful. And so if you've already had those conversations, then anything that comes up along the way, you're a little bit more prepared for. So exercise for you guys, make a list, talk about the holidays that are important to each of your families, the ones that aren't, and kind of figure out what you want that to look like on a yearly basis, how you're going to share time. And then also start thinking about some traditions you want to make for your marriage and your relationship, because you really get this kind of new chapter once you get married, to kind of say, okay, as of this date, we're married, and now we have this new part of our relationship to build together, even if you've been married for a while. And I always like thinking about it that way, so you can kind of divide these different sections of your relationship, and holidays is one of those ones for me. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy that little exercise, and make sure to mark your calendar. Every Monday at 6:15 I go live to talk about a new topic concerning marriage, divorce, and premarital planning. Have a good night.